Hello, my loves. I am so excited to be here today. We are going to be talking all things health and just the inside out and things that I don't often bring on this, even though that was my past business. My first business was an IBS anxiety business and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to bring that back because we all need to know how I say it, where it's like you need to be the CEO of your body if you want to be the CEO of your relationships and your bank account and all things in between. Like, you have to understand how this vessel works. And I think honestly it helps you stabilize your mental health a little bit when you know what's going on, especially as a woman. So I'm really excited to bring Emily on and chat all things. Before we get into introducing you, a question I always ask my guests is, this is the Healing to Happy podcast. It's only one, Healing to Happy podcast. And what I like to do is bring the human aspect into the podcast. And so what are you currently healing your way to happy on?
Oh my gosh! Wow. I love what you said about I love what you said about being the CEO of your body. That's really cool. Um, I am personally healing my relationship to emotion right now. So, going through a big shadow work journey, but I have been living a completely sober lifestyle now for a couple of months, and really just wanting to feel my emotions to the core, get to know them significantly more. So yeah, it's been fun. That's what I've been working on.
Oh my goodness, congrats. Everyone on this podcast knows how much I love that fucking journey. It's horrible. It's like the ayahuasca journey of your soul. It's a horrible experience, but also it's the most freeing thing in the world. So I
Wow.
want to hear more about that. That's awesome. But if you could introduce yourself to my community, reintroduce yourself to your community, and then we'll dive in.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Emily Tim, or Emily Bostin. Both my names are out on the internet. And technically, I'm a dietitian by background, and I came on social media in March 2020, during the pandemic. Before that, I was working in clinical settings, and I was actually being a stay-at-home mom for a while. And I was working a job in pharma at the time that I wasn't super passionate about. And I came online and started posting, and my social media took off, and I ended up building a business and doing this full time for the past 4 years. I specialize in endocrine health, primarily for women, but some men are getting interested now. And that looks like metabolic health, reproductive health, and more recently, mental health and emotional health. And I really like working with people on sustainable weight loss using unconventional strategy. Um, and we can talk about what that is in a little bit, but that's kind of the gist of it. And my Instagram, my handle is the endocrine nutritionist, and I do a lot of community stuff, live streams, all types of stuff over there.
Oh my goodness. And you guys go look at her Instagram. We'll make sure to put everything in the bio, but it really is. It's like a little one-stop shop for just oh, I need to look at these types of things. And then you have so much information, which
Thank
I love
you.
when social media does that. Plus, I know the back end of actually how much effort that fucking takes to put in. So all the props to you. It's awesome. So breaking down endocrine health, when someone wants to look at this, what are some symptoms that they would want to go see someone like you that they'd be experiencing?
Yeah. So I think really the umbrella that it falls under, it like traditionally people think of hormone balance. And I tend to think though that hormone balance is almost like this modern day equivalent of like hysteria for women. It makes women feel really out of control in their bodies. And so like a big mission of mine is to just help women feel more empowered, more in control in their body and understand what's going on so that you can understand your power in healing it. And endocrine health is really like the hormone system of the body. So the most common endocrine condition for women is polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. That's the majority of my clients. Also conditions like prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So like endocrine nutrition, and honestly, I didn't even mention the biggest one, which is overweight slash obesity, which is actually a disease, and we don't really talk
Mhm.
about that a lot. We just talk about weight loss, but it's actually a disease. So yeah, I like to empower people about the disease state so that they really understand what's going on, and and that they can release some of the feeling of like guilt or shame that they've brought this on themselves, because it's such a multifactorial like etiology. Like there's so much that goes into the imbalance that a lot of us experience today.
Mhm. And I mean, I know when I went on this journey, I had lost my period for 5 and a half. It took me 6 to get it back, years.
Wow.
And I know. And then I hit that age of 25 where I was like, "Oh, like when you're younger, you're like, this is fucking great. Like I don't need it." And then all of a sudden you're 25 and you're like, "I want to be a mom one day." Like I kind of need that part of my life, and going on that whole journey, and then my body shut down and I got this wild like rash that took over my whole body for about 8 months, and they couldn't figure out what was going on, and it was just like this horrible experience where there's just so much thrown at you, where it's just like, do this, don't eat that, do this, don't more so it's not even like do this, it's more so don't do this. Like it's like strip away everything that you know in your life and somehow figure out how to exist again. And I think a lot of people feel disempowered from even looking at hormonal health to begin with because it's so fucking confusing. You sit there and you're like, I have how many cycles and how many eggs and what do I have to eat and how do I do these things? And so we kind of push it to the back burner until someone like me, it blows up in your face and you have to fucking look at it. But even then, it feels eh, like a hose just being sprayed at your face, and you're like, I can't digest all this stuff. And so you get analysis paralysis of like, I don't know what right move to make. So I'm either going to move, you're moving in fear, but you're either not going to move or you're going to move too much. I see like that orthorexic route happen a lot too with
Yeah.
people, and like they get fearful of everything. And so, what is it like when someone's going through this and they're at that, like, I don't know where to go or to where to put my hands? Like, what direction should they go in?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that pendulum of extremes. And you see, I mean, I see so many people, even like accounts on, there's an account I
Yeah.
stumbled on yesterday. This woman's on the carnivore diet, which is alarming. To say the least.
It's
But
for
she,
epilepsy, guys. Like,
yeah,
stop doing it.
yeah,
It's for
exactly.
epilepsy.
But it's alarming. But she used to be vegan. And so I was like, that it made me
Damn.
sad, because I'm like, this is a person that actually needs to address the root of her addiction to extremes.
Yeah.
Um, where was I going with this? But yeah, I think that that is the biggest thing that makes people feel disempowered. And that is actually the root of the entire weight loss industry, is like they prey off of that idea that people are going to feel overwhelmed and feel powerless and feel like they need more and more external solutions. So like what I try to encourage people to do is to like, number one, like bring it back to yourself. You actually don't a lot of the time need a lot outside of yourself. Like it's tempting to want to go get hormone testing done and additional lab testing and to go see a naturopath and to do all of these things. But more information isn't actually the solution. A lot of the time, the solution is like find someone that actually knows what they're talking about, align yourself with the right strategy, and like go all in on it in a way that's going to actually be sustainable, so that like every single change you're making in real time feels like something you could do forever. um
Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of like just changing the way that you're thinking about it, to not just viewing the scale as the only marker of success, but like really viewing the body as an ecosystem, and working to bring balance back like from within.
I love that. And it really is, I think, the mindset part, because it's just like, oh, I'm so scared. And then you like swing the other way. So you want to do it all right. And you're like clinging on to it. And it's like, can you sustain that for a lifetime though? Like doing it in that way. And there are like detoxes and things that sometimes we do have to go through, but it's like one that should be guided and you should have someone walking you through that. Please stop doing things off of TikTok, dear God.
Yeah.
And it's just like, like walking through that process, because you can actually be doing more damage, and you learn in the process what can sustain you in the long term. And I know even a lot of my audience, it's just this like, because I talk about it where I'm just like, understanding your hormonal cycles, baseline. I think you should understand that, because as a woman dating, right? Like I do dating and relationships, I do marketing. And so it's like looking at that where it's just like understanding your hormonal cycle while dating. You are going to be high on life come like follicular, and you're like, I got everything down. And then come ovulation, you're like, I'm going to get you and everyone else here. And then it's like luteal's going to come and you're going to be a needy human that is all hung up on how much he texts you and how much your husband's not doing this and all these kind of things. And then menstruation, you're going to realize how much you kind of fucked it up in luteal. And then you're going to be in your self-sabotage. You're going to kind of swindle inside and all these kind of things. And so I think I want to like talk a lot about that hormonal cycle of like how can people start to tap into this and
Mhm.
start to utilize it to become the CEOs of their body and start to
Yeah.
actually look at this aspect to have more autonomy. Because I even with me, like I struggle with depression and anxiety, and it's something I've had my whole life. And it's what, and I know neuroinflammation and what has to do with it, but it would like, until I understood my cycles, I'd be like, I am crazy. Like I don't know what's happening inside of me. And so I'd love to get your take on like the breakdown of the four hormonal cycles and how people can start to optimize on
Yeah.
this and use it so they can actually start to have autonomy over their body.
I love that that's something that you talk about. Because I talk about that too, but interestingly, like there's not a large body of research about how to best optimize our lives according to our cycles because we're not supposed to know the power of our cycle. I view it as a very powerful thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what did I want to say about that? Um, oh, but one thing that I think is really interesting is like with PMS, for example, or even like PMDD, which is like premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is like an extreme form of PMS, we talk about those things like they are syndromes or disorders, but are they actually? Or is it that we are expecting not to experience those things? And so then we're labeling it as a problem. That is like the biggest thing that goes on in women's health, I feel like, is just making women feel like everything with their bodies is a problem because we live in a patriarchy, which is like a society designed for men by men. And so we're trying to fit into this society that really wasn't built for us hormonally. So I think about that a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, you did a great job summarizing it. Honestly, it's like that beginning part, um, the follicular part going into ovulation. I don't know about you, but like for me as a business owner, like follicular is this very even keeled, like I'm gonna get my ducks in a line kind of period. Going into ovulation is like hella creative period for me, a high energy, like untouchable. That's where I do a lot of my like live streams and things like that. And then going into like luteal is um more analytical stuff for me because I don't want to be seen as much. So I go more into numbers, behind the scenes, back end stuff. And then during the cycle is this kind of hibernation almost, where for me, that's where I do a lot of long form content and writing and things like that. But sadly, a lot of women are told there's something wrong with their bodies and wrong with these emotional swings that they experience. So most women go on hormonal birth control. And that's a personal decision. I'm not going to say it's bad or good, but if you're on hormonal birth control, you're not going to experience this as a woman. And I think it's like a really beautiful part of being a woman is that we do cycle in the same way that nature cycles, and we get to experience all these different ways of existing.
Mm-hmm.
um I don't know if that resonates, but like for me, I'm an endocrine dietitian, but I have never resonated personally with the idea of using birth control. It just never agreed with me. I felt really disconnected from like sexuality and emotions and creativity when I was using it.
Mm-hmm.
um and it makes me sad because especially for women with like polycystic ovarian syndrome or women like yourself who lost your cycle, that's the automatic response instead of addressing the root of what's going on emotionally, stress wise, mental health wise, what's going on with your diet and your lifestyle, and all those things that like your body's trying to communicate something.
Oh, 1,000%. I think that's something that is so wildly not spoken about, where, why are you on birth control? What is this actually helping you gain? And I can think back to when I was on birth control. I literally thought I was asexual. I was like, I have no sex drive. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. That's when I started to go like off the rails and get into like shitty ass relationships, and I was so like just out of it. And then all of a sudden I get this like implant taken out of my arm, and I'm like, I'm not crazy. Like, I'm
Wow.
not crazy. This is okay. And I'm actually a woman, and I actually really like sex, and I really like doing these things. And like being an expressive woman, and it's like, oh, that really shut me down. And that did happen when I got off of the implant. And then I was like, okay, I'm struggling to get back like my period. And this whole journey fucking happened. And every doctor get back, like, just take the pill. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no. And like, I think a lot of us don't understand that doctors aren't necessarily always right, and like push back if that's not something you want. But it's like, okay, there has to be another solution. Like, let me do my own research on that. I think a lot of us don't understand that aspect of like, let me go inwards and see, like, does this align with me? And I'm like, no, because I want babies and I know this is not going to help it. And I know this is just masking something that's
Yeah.
underneath it. And I'm going to find a fucking solution, and I'm going to look at these things. And I think a lot of us don't understand or don't feel confident enough to like tell a doctor, like, no, thank you, sir. I am going to do what I want with my ovaries. Thank you very much, though, for your unsolicited advice. And like going on that whole journey, because we don't have enough information, right?
Yeah.
We don't actually know what's going on. And so I think something to dive into that you touched on is like, why would someone's hormones be disrupted? Like, what could be going on that isn't just birth
Yeah.
control or something like that?
So I think the two biggest things are inflammation and insulin resistance. And inflammation can come from so many different things, but a lot of the time it's food, and a lot of the time it's the fact that women are, people in general, but women especially, are very afraid of carbohydrates.
Mm.
And so, like, most people don't eat whole grains and don't eat beans. And we associate with those things with making us gain weight. And so we become terrified of them. But that creates an inflammatory environment inside. And so, a lot of the work I do, like initially with my clients, is like bringing carbs back in. And a lot of the time, people are very terrified until they do it and until they start seeing weight loss very effortlessly. Or, like, I just had someone come to me who is young, 24, not even overweight, but has polycystic ovarian syndrome and some inflammation, and hadn't had a cycle in 6 months. Through that behavior of adding carbohydrates back in, she got it in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And that's what pisses me off. Like, it lights a fire in me, because I'm like, we are acting like this is so hard, and like our bodies are so crazy, and the solutions are so simple, so simple. And the thing about eliminating carbs and leaning more into protein, which is something I talk a lot about online, and a lot of people are very triggered by that conversation. But when we do that, all this excess protein is what contributes to insulin resistance and contributes to prediabetes and contributes to PCOS and contributes to weight gain. So in my opinion, like, most of it, um, like, I think for say, I don't remember the exact stat, but it's like 60 to 80% of people can regulate their cycle through nutrition and diet. And in my practice, I can't even think of a person who hasn't. Like, it's that
Yeah.
easy. Because the eating pattern is like right in the research. It's laid out. It's not. I'm not reinventing the wheel. It already exists. It's just, for some reason, we can't connect the dots a lot of the time. Like, in clinic. Are you in the U.S.? I think you're frozen.
Oh, there we go.
There.
Came back.
I was asking, are you?
So we were talking, huh?
What did you hear me say last?
Carbs, and how that's like the number one thing, and when people add it back in.
Okay, I don't remember where to restart from, but um,
Fine.
did
What
you?
was your question?
I was going to say, where are you from? I didn't even ask you.
I'm originally from Chicago, and then I lived in Asia for about 6 years, and then I currently live in Florida. And then I
Oh,
was in
okay.
Dallas, and now I'm in Florida.
Okay, I was just wondering if you were part of the U.S. medical system as well, but you are. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's
But
very
when I went on my whole hormonal journey, that was in Thailand, so that was super fun. And trying to figure that out in a third world country, it's like,
interesting.
it's
Very
very
interesting.
wild. It's
Do you,
very wild. I want to hear more like on the aspects. So yes, carbs. That was something that like I remember I was keto at the time because I was like, this is what everyone was doing back in like 2000, I don't know, 19.
yeah,
And was like hung up on that. And then I was doing F45 like twice a fucking day. I was also doing copious amounts of drugs and alcohol. And I was just like in this phase of like, I'm gonna wreck my life. And something I remember my naturopath looking at me and saying, she's like, do you want to talk about how your trauma is related to all of your health issues? And I looked at this, bless her cotton socks woman, Penny, and I said, what trauma? And she's like, okay, sure, sweetheart. But it stuck with me. And then once this like whole rash broke out over my entire body and I couldn't hide what was happening anymore, I had to actually go look at my trauma, not just what I was doing, which is my control issues, which was obsessing about how many foods I could eliminate. At that time, I had eliminated 13 different food groups. So I was literally eating nothing. I was that girl that would like walk around with like smoothies in my purse and like sit at the restaurant and like drink that and pretend I was fine. And everyone's looking at me like, girl, you okay? Like, are you sure you're okay? And I'm like, I think so. And really looking back at that time period, I was like, it's all trauma. Like everything was, I was under eating because of trauma. My body couldn't even absorb the fucking copious amounts of superfoods I was trying to pump into my body because of trauma. And so I'd love to like break down how, when you go through trauma, what is happening in your body and why can't you absorb the nutrients you need? And that can often lead to all of these other health issues.
Yeah, that's a huge one. That's something I didn't really bring into my practice until maybe like a year and a half ago. But it's been so fun since I've brought that in because just the conversations and the coaching and the depth of it is so much more. But yeah, like with being like with obesity, for example, which is just having excess body weight, I find this fascinating. Like nearly 50% of people with obesity have experienced a childhood trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
and that is like whoa. And then not to mention just the fact that there's also this interesting hypothesis that an epidemiologist in Sweden had proposed last year, which I kind of agree with and think is fascinating, which is that he's proposing that obesity actually didn't originate from the fact that we live in an unhealthy society. He's proposing that it originated way back in like the 30s, and that he thinks it happened because as people we evolved with food. Like our language evolved around fires when we were learning how to cook, and our critical thinking evolved from around food. Every like our community and our connection, everything about us as people culturally is centered around food, and like we evolved with it, which is really cool. And so he's saying that that's actually like a part of our DNA. And so that like back in the 30s, when I think it was like World War, it was like Great Depression time, and there were a lot of like societal stressors. And like back then we see that the largest members of society were already becoming larger. And so
Hmm.
he's saying, like he calls it like the social evolution hypothesis, which is that our bodies, because we aren't socially connected, it like basically internalizes that, and then thinks that there's food insecurity. And so in genetically susceptible people, the theory is that that is actually what contributes to them becoming obese. And this can happen on like a microcosm level, like in a family. Um, like in the example of the adverse childhood traumas, or it could happen on a societal level. But to me, I actually think that's a huge part of what's going on is like our lack of connection to one another and our lack of emotional health as a priority. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, like in the body with trauma, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding of it is that, like in your gut, everything happens in the gut. And so, like if you're in a fight or flight response, I think I personally experienced this when I went through a traumatic period like a year and a half ago. Your intestine like thinks that you're in a fight or flight response, and so you're releasing adrenaline and cortisol too, but like adrenaline, and that is making it so you're not uh, absorbing like all of the nutrition that you need to absorb, and you're more inflamed, and so that contributes to like disease pathophysiology.
Mm.
um, and I think there are more subtle things too, like just being in a stress response, you're not using the part of your brain where you can think critically. Like you're not going to be able to prioritize feeding yourself well, you're just trying to get food in.
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, I think it's a way bigger issue than we talk about, and it's part of the reason why I've brought shadow work and emotional health more into my coaching. And people love it. People respond really well to it because it's like it's probably similar with it's like if you're doing the same thing over and over again and not getting the result that you want, there's something unconsciously going on,
Mm-hmm.
like you're not you're not just lazy. Like there's some reason why you're not letting yourself have that, or why it's not safe for you to have it yet.
Mhm. I think it's so interesting, like, looking at those things because you look at, like, blue zones, right? Like, you're talking about the communal aspect. The reason they're the blue zones, every single one of them, they eat dinner together, they have community, they're out, it's natural, like, they're playing, they have a life. We're, like, at least in America, we're very, like, sedentary. I don't even know how to actually say that word. We sit a lot, however the
Yeah.
fuck you say that word.
Yeah.
Like, and we isolate a lot, especially post-pandemic model. A lot of us don't know how to connect with people. Like I see this in the dating world. It's like, "Oh, I want a partner." And it's like, "Oh, but I can only have a conversation through text message or dating apps." Like I don't actually know how to fucking be vulnerable. And I'm like, "This is the reason why. Like what do we see is going on here?" Like all this stuff came about and I'm like, "There's a reason there's a rise in mental health. There's a reason there's a lot rise in body size. There's a reason there's a rise in all these health issues." It's like because we're disconnected. We're so disconnected. And yes, we can shift habits and we can create, you know, something I work with my clients on when we're talking about, you know, like adding in the health side of things and like really accumulating these things into our lives. It's why aren't you stacking the habit? Like your body naturally wants to move. You should not want to be sitting all day. Like I can't. Like I don't know how. Unless like I'm about to get my period or like I'm having a depression day, but like other than that I need to move. I need to eat. I need to do these things. And if I can look back at my life when I wasn't eating and I could literally go an entire day without ever thinking about food because I was riddled with cortisol. I was riddled with adrenaline because I was stuck in fight or flight. So my body genuinely just didn't crave food because I was just running. And so when people like come to me and they're like, "Oh, I can't break this habit and I'm not hungry." I'm like, "Cortisol. Like you need to calm the fuck down. Like you should be hungry. You are pumping out energy to do shit all day. Slow down and I'm sure you're going to be a starving little horse." And like we need to then feed you the right thing, like you said, carbs and things like that. And I think that is what helps, at least from my lens. Like I look at my whole journey, like the fact that I know how my body works makes me feel way more empowered around things. Do I always make the right decisions? Fuck no. Do I still feel like a fucking crazy girl sometimes? All the time. But at least I could go, well, we're here in my cycle or my blood sugar's low. That's my favorite one to go. I'm like, my blood sugar's low. I'm about to eat your face off. Give me a snack. Like that type of thing. Like
Yeah.
it'll save your life.
I Yeah, I feel like your coaching is so needed, because I'm on the dating apps right now, and that's
Yeah.
something I notice is like I don't know, I had a date last week, and like the guy was nice, but his whole life happened in his house,
Yep.
and I felt sad for that, but I was like, whoa, I'm gonna have to be I'm gonna be doing the whole relationship because he was very transparent about it. He become so socially anxious because of
Mm-hmm.
COVID and everything, and it's so connected. It's like we can't just think we're gonna change our diets and eat differently and that's gonna be health.
Yep.
Health is the lifestyle. There's this beautiful movement called the slow food movement, which ties into what you were talking about with like the culture of the blue zones and the Mediterranean diet, which is all about cooking and taking the time and like enjoying the aesthetic and the arts of life. That's what we miss. Creativity is a part of health. Philosophy is a part of health. There's a really interesting new discipline called philosophical health, where it's like the lost art of people actually sitting around and thinking about what they want their lives to be. And
I love that.
I think it's so beautiful. But it's like, yes, it's not just I need to eat the healthy things. It's like, let me actually think about why this has become the last priority in my life.
Mm. That's a really good question. Where it's like, why is this not a priority? And I see this a lot because working with high achievers, the thing I hear a lot is, oh, I have to eat again. Like
Yeah.
it's so exhausting. I have to go eat. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like my favorite hobby. Like I love going to nice restaurants. I love experiencing food. Like catch me. I mean, if I'm at home, I generally eat the same thing every day because based on different things where I'm at in my cycle, but like it helps me think less. But the amount of times I heard high achievers be like, "Yeah, I forgot to eat," or like, it's just such a hassle. All I'm doing is thinking about eating, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
what?
That's uh, that's Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the core of it all. Because I just feel like even as if you're a high achieving person, you kind of almost don't realize that if you would just slow down a tiny bit and eat super good stuff, your day would actually feel way easier and you'd actually need less time.
A
Um,
thousand percent.
like I find that. But yeah, it's just this it's this weirdness where it's part of like the mindset shift. It's like, why am I thinking about this as like heavy and as adding more to my life? How can I shift my mindset and think about it as just this beautiful, like grounding thing that's the most important thing in my life, so that during stress, that's the thing that I come back to. Like it's an outlet to make
Hmm.
a 10-15 minute meal, or it doesn't have to be gourmet, but
Yeah. And it's so helpful to understand it because you can sit there and be like, oh, I'm not thinking straight, or I'm not making an executive decision, or I have writer's block, or I'm treating my staff like shit, or oops, I just popped off at my fucking partner. Like, oh, my blood sugar's low. I
yeah.
should probably go do that. Ooh, I didn't have enough carbs or protein today. Or like, I'm feeling bloated and I don't want to go live because I haven't pooped today. And it's like, oh, I haven't had enough vegetables. Or like, my skin's flaring up. And it's like, oh, bitch, you've been eating charcuterie every night. Like, of course it is. Like,
Mhm.
let's look at these things as opposed to being like, my body's just fighting against me and therefore I have to surrender and everything is working against me. It's like, no, baby. Like, you have autonomy over this beautiful vessel if you just slow down. And food is not a means to a body size. I'm around a lot of like fitness people where they're like, chicken, uh, rice, and broccoli. And I'm like, that's dope. I'm going to go insane. Like, this ain't going to work for me. I'm a feminine woman that likes creativity and I like a lot of stuff. Like, I got to eat other things. But I think that's why people are like, oh, I'm so bored, or this feels like a task, or something like that. And they're bypassing it because the end game for them is a body size versus like longevity and impact, right? Like, as soon as I know my blood sugar is low or I need to get something, like after this call, I'm like, I need to go get my blood sugar. Like, we need to go balance that out. I can feel it. Otherwise, my next task is not going to be as impactful. And I think a lot of us don't understand that because we think this is going to be a lot of work. And it's like, no, just like anything else. One, if you make enough money, outsource it, baby.
Yeah.
Or like meal prep, like have something happen, set yourself up for success. And so, speaking to that high achiever that is like, I know I need to, but one, I don't know where to start. Two, I don't know, like, it seems like a lot. Where can they get started?
Yeah. God, there's so much good stuff there too. And I think like when we make it a task, what it to me, what it actually becomes is just another numbing behavior in life,
Mhm.
where you're addicted to tracking your calories and your macros, and you're not actually like in touch with your body at all. And for women, like the pursuit of the perfect body is like it's a part of almost all of our personalities. You have to like intentionally pull that out to really realize what you're
Mhm.
doing, because you feel like naked if you're not doing it, like if you're not obsessing about your body in some way or working on fixing something. um, but I say like the place to begin is to look at your relationship with food, like looking at something called the hunger fullness scale,
Mm.
which you can find online, and you can start to look at like when do I eat? Do I wait until I'm like hangry to eat, and then of course I'm going to make bad decisions? Do I starve myself all day and then eat one big meal at night? Like, and then also this is kind of almost like shadow work for eating, where it becomes like, how are the patterns in your diet mirroring patterns in your life? Self neglect or binging. That's a big, are you starving and then binging? Like this all or nothing mentality. Like, what are the patterns? Um, and then also just recognizing like how we do one thing is how we do mostly everything in our lives. There's this beautiful quote, and it's like, show me what you eat, and I'll show you who you are.
Mhm.
And it's so true. If you really stop and think about what are you eating, and what does that say about you, and is it the fullest self-expression that you want it to be?
Mm.
Um, and then practically, plant forward eating is really like where it's at. Um, Leaning into whole grains, beans, vegetables, fruits, olive oil, nuts and seeds. You don't have to be vegetarian, but like we do want to pull back on animal protein more than most people would realize. Um,
Mhm.
and when you do that, oh my God, you feel so good. Like it's insanity. So that's where I would
Yeah.
really begin. But I think the thing is it's so um, it's so opposite of what we've been taught that it can feel overwhelming. So like having a little bit of guidance is good. Like I post a bunch of stuff on my page. Um, I wish I had like a great online resource to point you to, but they're really the maybe like Plant Forward Kitchen is a good one,
Mhm.
or bluezones.org, or what's the other one? oldwayspt.org. Those are all some great like websites to kind of look at plant forward eating and what it is. Um, but yeah, just starting by like eating 3 solid meals and looking at like what am I missing and how am I feeling.
That it's like, how am I feeling after this meal? I think a lot of us, it's like, move on to the next task, or I'm eating because I have to, and then I have to jump into this meeting, and you're like, and then all of a sudden you finish work and you're like unbuttoning your pants and you're like, I'm so bloated. And it's like, yeah, baby girl, you just shoveled that in front of your face for 2.3 seconds and didn't give your body any time to
Mhm.
digest that or to get into the zone of feeling into that. I remember an example I used to give in my gut health business was describing your hunger and your fullness. It's like, imagine an alien comes down. How would you describe being hungry? And it's like, oh, my stomach cramps, my low energy happens, I yell at everyone around me, like I just get very angry, and like I don't know what's happening. And then they're like, okay, now describe to an alien about being full, and it's like, oh, I have to unbutton my pants, I get really tired, do this whole thing, and like my body's just fatigued, and I lean forward and I need to go take a nap. And the alien's like, I don't want to fucking do that, like that sounds fucking horrible. And it's like, it's so true that that's how it is, where it's like, okay, that's not actually like, you should get a little twinge in your body. And generally around the same time, you're gonna be hungry because your body's a fucking clock. Like it's gonna move with that pending like certain things, but it's like generally it's around the same time. Generally, you don't have to wait until you're what one of the most frustrating fucking things. I'm lightheaded. I think I'm hungry. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why did you wait that long? It
That's
should
the
not go that far.
that's the biggest thing. Like we are so disconnected. I'm sure you ran into this in your
Yeah.
business, but just so disconnected from being in the body at all. Like
Yeah.
getting out of your head and actually like hearing your hunger the first time. Most women don't. They hear it
No.
when they're about to faint. um, and that's not all our fault. I
Yeah.
mean, we live these crazy lives, but it's like, what can we do? How can you make more space and not fall into the trap of like the harder we work, the better we are kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, nourishment to me, nutrition is so feminine, and like we're trying to make it masculine. I'm like, no, it's so feminine. It's so intuitive and colorful and nourishing and creative, and it's this experience. And even I too get bogged down because I don't like cooking. Like it just, I didn't get hit with that gene. I don't know. Like I love baking, but like cooking to me, I'm like, especially like. I like cooking for other people, what have you, but like cooking for myself, I'm like, I have all these leftovers, like that whole thing. Like I get it, but at the same time, being tapped into your body and being able to know, like, oh, I intuit, like I know I'm craving carbs for this. I genuinely like my body will fucking howl for certain vegetables, and I'm like, okay, baby, we got you. We will go to the grocery store and get that. Like,
Yeah.
it's this experience of really nourishing yourself and slowing down. A lot of people where it's like, oh, I want to be more feminine. A great way to start is, how are you nourishing yourself? Like, what is that journey like for you? How are you actually stepping in and cultivating an experience with your nutrition versus making it a task and making it very masculine oriented?
So true. Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. And it's something I talk about too. I mean, I don't talk probably as much as you do about the feminine masculine energy balance, but yeah, it's like it's a way of bringing the focus back to yourself and bringing your energy back, getting back in your frame of reference. And that's like the most magnetizing way to exist anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I think how you said it, where it's like, tell me how you nourish yourself, and I'll tell you how much you love yourself. Like it's one of those things, because someone that loves themselves, it's like, just think, the thing that I always think about is like, would I do that to my kid? Right? Like, would I? They're like coming to me, pulling out my pant leg, like, Mom, I'm so hungry, and I'm like, hold on, let me finish this task. Like, let me finish work. I would never. I don't have kids yet, but I imagine I would never fucking do that to them. And it's like, but the little girl inside of us is just fucking screaming for this love and attention and nourishment and a snack, like a fucking snack. Like, just feed her a snack, and all women will be happy. Trust me, we want them. Like, it's often that experience, but because it's like, oh, but I want this body size, or oh, because this is a task, or oh, because I don't know what to eat, so I'm just gonna not do it, or I'm going to overdo it because I'm emotional. It's just figuring out how can you actually do this through the lens of love versus the lens of, I don't know, sabotage a little bit, or task oriented, or not making this a priority. Like, it really is a very, very intimate experience if you let it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if your life is chaos, if your emotions are chaos, if your vision isn't clear, I think all of that ties back into like you're not going to be grounded. And when you're
Mm,
not grounded, you're definitely not going to be um, able to focus enough to plan a meal in a balanced way.
yeah. What do you run into, like, with your clients and everyone on your social media platform? Like, what is the number one thing people are like stuck with?
I really think it's just this echo of, I talk about this in an interesting way, which is like, to me, I think the whole hype, like protein, and I know people like when I talk about protein, then sometimes people think I'm saying that we don't need protein, which is not what I'm saying, but we
Hmm.
need significantly less than media would lead us on to believe. Protein is like the best, seriously, the best brand in human history because it has
Mm,
whoever did that, this was like a cultural effort, and a direct result of patriarchy, I think, because like meat equals masculinity,
yeah.
and strength. That's what but we've created this culture where protein is health. So when I'm coming over here and I'm saying like, no, that's not true. Actually, it's fiber. Fiber is health, and fiber is whole grains and beans and vegetables and fruits, and the meat is actually like the least important part of your diet. That it's just such a paradigm shift that's what people struggle with is like it's an act of rebellion when you do this because you're going to be going against what the weight loss and diet industry and supplement industry what they want you to do. But I really think when you start to understand like the history of where this comes from and that it's really a money making scheme, truly, we promote protein, people get sick and big, then they go into healthcare, we make money off of them there, and then they're constantly on a never ending hamster wheel of weight loss where we're selling them as the solution that is actually the problem.
Hmm.
And that is really what's going on. So it's a hard thing to break because it's like, well, this person's saying it and this person's saying it and everybody's saying it and the guidelines are saying it. And but when you zoom out and you really look at things like the Mediterranean diet, which is the most studied eating pattern on the planet, or the planetary health diet, which is a new diet out of Harvard, which is talking about like the intersection between human health and climate change, or you look at
Mm,
the blue zones, the longest living people. That's how all of these diets work. They're very low in animal protein and animal product, but that's a hard thing for people to internalize because it does require radical change.
yeah. It's so funny. I remember laying in bed one time with an ex partner of mine, and I was just he could see me thinking, and he's like, "What are you thinking about?" And I was like, "I'm counting how many vegetables I had today." Like, making sure, like, I don't know why my brain does this. I get to the end of the day and I'm like, I want to make sure that I ate enough vegetables because I know how my next morning's gonna go if I didn't get enough. Like, I just have to calculate this. And I always ask my friends this, and they're like, no, I don't think, well, the women, because a lot of my friends are health conscious, so they'll think of that and they'll start to be like, yeah, I do that. But the men are like, no, I genuinely never think of that. I'm like, it's just the way my brain works. Like, how much fiber did I get today? Let's count. Did I have it at every meal? Okay, no. If I didn't, then I have to go like make a quick smoothie with some extra greens in it. Like, whereas like I see it a lot with like men, they're like, I have to go get my protein intake in, and I'm like, I have to go make a smoothie because I didn't get enough vegetables in.
And the thing that like this is why I'll never stop talking about this message, no matter what the internet has to say about. And there, for every hater,
Yeah,
there's a lover. That's just life.
yeah.
Um, but the sad thing is like this overconsumption of animal protein. Like this is what directly impacts gut health. This is what
Hmm.
causes the majority of preventable cancers. This is what causes diabetes. This is what causes obesity. Like I will die on that hill. And the doctor that runs nutritionfacts.org says all the same things that I say. But the poor guy, I think he kind of vanished into the ether, if I'm being honest, because if you go to his Instagram, his name's Michael Greger. People are horrible to him on his Instagram.
Mhm.
And it's a weird, when you really like it, it's weird. It's like, why
Yeah.
are people, like, people literally will comment on my content sometimes if I really talk about animal protein. They will say the most horrific, like, personal things, like, about that I shouldn't be alive. And
Yeah.
it's like, what's really going on there? Because this is like content about food.
Yeah.
But what's going on is that that's the brand of protein. It's a cult. Like, people have gotten to this place where I don't know why, but it's such a part of their, especially men, it's such a part of their personality and their masculinity. Um, and this notion that that's what we need to build muscle, and it's like, yeah, we need protein to build muscle, but like, the average person isn't a bodybuilder. And thank
Yeah.
God for that, because we lose a lot of bodybuilders every single year at very young ages, which is sad. um, the average person just needs to like maintain a healthy weight and prevent disease and be healthy and happy.
Mhm.
Like, even the
Mhm.
sport of bodybuilding, it's like, why are we actually doing that? That's a whole other conversation. Like,
I
like,
know. I'm like, the man I'm dating is going into physique competition, and I'm like, can we just? I'll support you in whatever you do, but like, this is horrible.
oh
Like,
man, I don't mean to. I mean, I think that it's. I get why people could do. Like, I love working out and I love fitness and I love the high of it. So I understand how someone could go down that path. And of all the addictions, it's a healthier one, I suppose.
yeah.
But it's like this weird thing where it's like, why our body is not. Is that really the? I don't even know how to
Yeah.
explain it. I think you know what I mean. It's a little strange.
Yeah. Like, is that really the point? Like, don't we want to live long and like play with our grandbabies?
Yeah,
Like, isn't that
chill
the
out.
point? Like, gotta look at that a little bit. But hey, you boys be boys, you be boys, go do your thing. I'm gonna be a girl over here and eat my carbs and do my things and vegetables and count my plants. Don't mind me. Uh, I love this. I feel like so many people could really use this conversation. I'm so thankful for your time and your energy and all things in between. Is there any last words? And then after that, just share your Instagram and where people can get in touch with you.
Thank you, Laura. This was so fun. Such a great
Yay.
conversation, like, with so many relevant, interesting, like, little points to think about. So yeah, I just thank you. And um, if anyone resonated with this conversation, I'd love to connect. I always have my DMs open. So
Yay. And just repeat your Instagram one last time.
it is endocrine, which is a long word, ENDOCRINE, nutritionist. I'm also on TikTok, and I have a new Substack platform, which I'm having a
Ooh.
lot of fun, like, writing over there. So
I love that. I also think you should use the hook if you haven't already. Protein is part of the cult. I feel like that's a good hook. Like it'll
I've
pop off
never
with some
said that.
haters,
I
but I
don't
think
think
it'll
I.
be
Yeah,
great. It'll
yeah.
be good. You like said it, I was like, ooh, that's a hook. But thank you so much for being on here and everything in between. We'll make sure to put everything in the show notes. And anyone that is tuning in, please go follow her. She has so much fun on the Instagrams and all the things. And it's a really good like resource to tap into and get some knowledge. And y'all, it means the world to me if you go subscribe. We have new episodes every single Monday, and you write us a review. It helps us bring it to the top. Y'all know my mission is to bring this to the 1% this year and get more incredible guests like Emily on here. So go do that. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.